Well, we're nearing the finish line, and the final thing that we have to focus on is the doors. Now, the doors can really make or break this piece, so it's important that they give the right impression, because really it's the first thing people are going to see when they look at the cabinet. So I have a SketchUp drawing that I've been working with here in the shop. Oops, screensaver, sorry. And I've done 2 or 3 variations of that. I even took a piece of poster board. I know you really can't see this, but did a full-size drawing here just to kind of work it out in my brain, make sure it looked the way I want it to look. Now, an important aspect of this design is the grain flow. And let me show you on the SketchUp drawing. Now, what I'm going for here is really a sense of grain continuity. The top rail and the bottom rail will be cut from one single piece, so the grain just flows naturally from one piece to the other. Now, if we did a more traditional design here where the stiles go all the way up and down from top to bottom, that would actually interrupt the grain flow. You'd have horizontal grain, a little vertical, and more horizontal. And that's not what I want. I just want to make this look like it's actually one board separated by this one little dividing line here. Same thing at the bottom, and then on the outside I went with a more traditional full-length top to bottom style. But I think this will give us some interesting design opportunities in the placement of our pegs and things like that. We have a nice thin style here in the middle, little curve up at the top. So we'll play with it a little bit more, but I think this is pretty much where I'm going to end up. Now, the tops of our 2 doors make a nice, smooth, continuous curve together, but separately, each one is going to have 1/2 of that curve. So I find the easiest thing to do is to make a single template for one of the doors, and then I'll be able to flip it over and do the other side, and when it's all said and done, it's going to be perfectly symmetrical, but I only have to draw 1/2. So I've got a little piece of MDF, French curve, my little adjustable square, and that's all we need to set this up. Now that the template's done, I can cut and mill all of my door parts. Now I'm going to cut the door parts to size, but before I do that, I'm just going to double check with my drawing and make sure that I remember where all my tenons are going to be. It's a lot easier than you might think to cut your pieces too short because you forgot to account for that extra length. So it's always good to double check yourself before you make that cut. Our skinny style here has a tenon on both ends, and our top and bottom pieces have a tenon, but only on one side. There's no tenon on this side. They get a mortise on the other side, so it's a little bit different than normal. But as long as we keep that in mind and we know what we need to do, we shouldn't get mixed up. Now I can start cutting the joinery for the doors, and it all starts with the mortises. I'm going to use the hollow chisel mortiser to do it, and the mortises themselves are going to be about 2 inches wide, 1 inch deep, and 3/8 of an inch thick. Now you may have noticed a little bit of smoke on that first cut, and it's to be expected. It's a really dense hardwood that we're working with, and that's a lot of heat and friction as we plunge that chisel down. So a little bit of smoke is okay, but if you have a lot of smoke and you start seeing little embers coming up, that's bad. Probably means you need to sharpen your bit and or your chisel. Another thing that I like to do to make sure everything runs smoothly is in between each mortise I will lubricate the blade and the bit. So I have this OptiCut XL stuff. It's a water-based lubricant, which is nice because it means it's not going to cause any really major issues. There's no silicone in it, so there's no finishing issues. And I usually spray the entire thing pretty liberally. I just clean up the drips, and once it's soaked pretty good, I turn it on. And just make sure it gets distributed throughout the entire interior. And that really helps decrease the friction and make us, give us that much more smooth of a cut. Now the mortises for the top and bottom rails are pretty much like the one that we just cut. The only difference is on the top, remember we're going to be cutting that shape into it. So the mortise that we cut, we need to set the plunge depth a little bit deeper to account for the material that we're going to remove in a subsequent step. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. All right, now we're cooking with EVOO, just like Rachel Ray does. I'm going to cut the tenons here at the table saw. The easiest way that I know how is with the dado blade and a miter gauge, and you can make pretty quick work of it. Now, we did cover tenons and mortise construction in an older episode pretty far back. It's called Tenons Anyone. We had part 1 and part 2, so check both of those out if you're not familiar with this process. But this is a quick way to get the job done and get it done pretty accurately. Now, all of my tenons were intentionally cut just slightly oversized so that I could finesse the fit and match each tenon to each particular mortise. If there's any slight variation in the mortises, it's nice to have a little bit of wiggle room there to make it a perfect fit. So when I test the fit initially, it's just a little bit too tight. What we're looking for is a slip fit. But unfortunately, this would take a little bit too much pressure to push in. So the first thing that I like to do is get the workpiece in the bench, and either with a chisel or a shoulder plane like this, I just relieve some of the material. All right, let's give it a quick test fit again. That is really close. Now, the other thing that we haven't done yet is we haven't cleaned out the inside of the mortise. You can see on this little test piece here, you see the kind of condition that leaves the inside of that hole? That's the standard thing you could expect from a hollow chisel, mortising chisel. And that's not very good, so we need to clean that up a little bit, and that should give me the rest of the leeway that I need to get the tenon all the way down. So we'll clamp this guy in and start removing some of that material. And sometimes when it's just so close and you're almost there, it might be just easier to take a little bit of sandpaper and ease that edge just a little bit, smooth it out, and you'll find that that gives you the fit that you're looking for. And there it is. Nice slip fit. Goes on easy, but doesn't fall out. All right, so I've got one of the door frames here. The only piece that's not installed is the vertical skinny style because I haven't cut away the portion of the top yet, and that's what's required to give this thing the exact fit that we want. Now, I know in the past, some of you may have heard me say the phrase, throw away your tape measure, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but there is some truth to it. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times when you measure, there's cumulative error that occurs between the measuring, the marking, and the cutting. Those are 3 areas where you could really, just a 16th here and there really adds up. So this is a good example of how something like that can happen. I measured everything out. I cut the tenons for this long vertical piece at the same time that I cut the other tenons just because I had the setup there and it was convenient for me to do it. What I should have done is left the skinny piece alone, got the door frame to the point that it is right here where everything is locked in place, cut that portion at the top, cut that little piece out, and then make my vertical style, the little skinny style, cut the tenons for that. Because what wound up happening is I cut based on my measurements. And if my measurement or a mark or something was just slightly off, it's going to really show itself right now. So check this out. Even though I don't have this material removed yet, I could still see where the style would fall. And that would be perfect if it was right in line just like that. But the actual measurement, when I bring it flush with the bottom, is right there. And I've got roughly a proud 16th, something a little bit greater than a 16th here, of a gap, which means if I cut along the line that my template gave me here, if I cut exactly to that line, my frame is going to be out of whack. I'm going to have a little bit of a gap here. And if I close this and clamp it in this way, to close the gap, the door is going to actually be crooked at the top, which is going to be really, really bad. So the only way that I can fix it, now that my tenons are already cut, the only way to fix it at this point is to change the dimensions of this cut here, bring it in that 16th, and adjust for the extra material that I took off. Now, anybody who's been watching the show for any length of time knows that I don't sugarcoat anything. Clearly, if I make a mistake, I'm going to show it on the video. And that goes for injuries as well. Unfortunately, I haven't had anything happen in the past 2 years of doing the show, until today. And I made a very stupid error, and it's something that I want to share with you guys so that you can prevent that from happening. Now, first of all, what you saw on the camera was me using the paddles with a template and I had a nice clean cut because I really only had about a 64th of an inch to remove. But clearly, as the blade, the bit, is rotating this way, once we get to this point in that curve, we're going against the grain. And it would be smart to actually run the board the other way from the beginning, which was really my mistake with that first piece. So what wound up happening was, make a long story short, I decided, you know what, it's just a 64th of an inch. Instead of taking the template off, putting the template on the other side of the board and running it with the grain, let me just do it this way, control it with my bare hands, and I can kind of, maneuver it and get that little tiny bit off of there. Well, look, the bottom line is anytime you run a blade against the end grain, whether it's the jointer or even if you run like an end grain butcher block through the planer, it's bad news. It's just stupid, and it's just not a smart thing to do. So unfortunately, sometimes in the shop, we don't always do the smart thing. And I tried to do it with my bare hands, and I wound up paying the price. The board, the little workpiece here, the tenon, ran into my palm, and you could see the damage that was done. That's life. It's not a huge deal, but the bottom line is this was completely preventable. Even if I consider this a learning mistake here, let's say I didn't know that would have caused a kickback. Using the paddles means that the board might get destroyed and shoot out to the side, but at least my hands were involved in the act. Now, because I decided to go at it freehand, I wound up with a board, and I'm dripping blood here, sorry about that. I wound up with a board shooting into my palm, and which is probably going to result in a pretty good sized bruise. It's really just a skin flap at this point. The flap, as soon as it's all cleaned up, is going to cover it. It'll probably heal quickly. But that's just not the point. The point is I shouldn't have even had to have this. This is really stupid of me. So I just wanted to show you guys that you need to pay extra special attention to which side you place that template on. And if for some reason you're limited in which side you could place it on, you can always use a bit that has the bearing at either the top or the bottom, depending on where your template is. And you can use that to make sure you are always going with the grain. And if you ever go against the grain, you have to use, okay, let's put it this way. I used as much caution as possible with the exception of the paddles. I didn't use the paddles, and it still kicked back. Okay, so that just goes to show you, blades against the grain, bad news. So use your brain, unlike me, and learn from my mistakes. Now, that little mistake is clearly a setback, and it needs to be fixed. So I'm going to do the best job I can to repair it. If it doesn't look right after the repair, I may have no choice but to build a new part, maybe even build the entire top rail, both parts, again, so that they match the way I want them to. So first order of business, I need to get glue into these cracks. So what I need to do is stop the glue from coming out the other end. And I'm going to use some blue tape to do that on the back end here. Now, the actual damage that's been done is the grain has split just a little bit here at the top. Now, these little nicks up there, that's actually okay because I needed to remove that material anyway, so I may be able to get away with that. But back here, I need to secure those pieces down again. So the blue tape is going to serve as a dam, and it's going to stop any of the epoxy from leaking through. And I will take some epoxy, which I already have in this little cup here. Now, if you look at the way the grain is, the good thing about this mistake is the fact that it's with the grain. So that if we fill it with a material that looks similar to the contrasting color of the grain, like a deeper reddish brown color, it may not look that bad. It may look very natural. So I'm going to take a little bit of trans tint here. This is a reddish brown trans tint. Not much, just a couple drops. And that's going to give me a little bit of pigment that's going to change this to a color that may look natural. Okay, so once that's mixed, I will start pushing it into the grain. We're going to have a lot of cleanup to do after this, but that's okay. So I just basically, at this point, need to put it into a clamp to bring those fibers back together, close them up, and the epoxy is going to fill any gaps. Now that's why I use epoxy on this, because number one, it dries nice and slow and takes a dye very well. The other reason is because any gaps that are left over are actually going to be filled. Okay, PVA glue, regular Type-On, things like that, aren't gap filling, but epoxy will fill in those gaps and support the structure. All right, so the epoxy did its job. It filled all the gaps, and now I just have to get rid of the extra material. So a block plane, a chisel, you could even use a random orbit sander to clean all this material off. Just get the bulk of it. You don't have to get all the way down to perfect bare wood. I just want to see how close we are and what else we might need to do to fix this. I think a lot of you are probably wondering why I'm going through so much trouble to save this piece versus just grabbing a new board and going. Well, first of all, I don't have any more material. I would need to order some or go to the lumber store and get it. If you remember also, from the very beginning, I was grain matching this material, so I wouldn't just be replacing this top piece, I would be replacing the other as well. And since the entire door frame came from the same board, it would be really tricky for me to find something that looks and matches the rest of the pieces. So it would really be a whole entire do-over. And I think there's definitely some value in being able to save something that's been screwed up as opposed to just trashing the whole thing and starting over with an expensive wood like Babinga. So that's really the primary reason for me doing it. I'd like to say part of it is laziness, but at the same time, all this repair work is sometimes as much work as just scrapping it and starting over. So let me clean off this material and we'll see where we're at after that. All right, well, it's been a long day and I had an unexpected detour. I'll put a little water on here so you can see what this might look like with some finish on it. That's the repair. There's where the crack lines were. And really the only part that I'm not completely happy with is right there, 3 little lines. But it's through the end grain, so I don't know what else you could do about it, but that's on the inside of a door frame, so. Not bad. Not bad.